Hello, this video is going to be about the saturation of solutions. Now before I talk about the saturation, I need to talk a little bit about some old stuff that we learned to make sure you remember it. First, some definitions. A solute is the thing that gets dissolved into a solvent to form a solution. So the solute gets dissolved, the solvent does the dissolving, and the solution is the combination. Second, I need you to remember that the solubility of a substance is defined as the maximum amount of that substance that you can dissolve in a given volume of solvent. Normally we measure it in the number of grams you can dissolve per 100 milliliters of solvent. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get to the new stuff. Let's say you want to measure the solubility of sodium chloride at 60 degrees. So you had 100 milliliters of 60-degree water, and you add some sodium chloride, and you stir it up until it's dissolved. You keep doing this. You see that it dissolves, so you add some more, and you stir, and you see it dissolve. And you repeat this process over and over again, adding some, stirring, you add some, you stir, until eventually what's going to happen is, you're going to add some, you will stir it up, and it's not going to dissolve. So you will reach a certain point where mixing does not dissolve the sodium chloride anymore, and it stays separated out. Theoretically, let's say you added 40 grams of sodium chloride before it stopped dissolving, then you would conclude that the solubility of sodium chloride in 60-degree water was 40 grams per 100 milliliters, because that's how much you had to add before it stopped dissolving. So if you had less than 40 grams dissolved, you would be able to dissolve some more. And if you had more than 40 grams, you wouldn't be able to add any more. Like you would put it in and you'd stir and it wouldn't dissolve in. So this is sort of a review from solubility. Let's act like you have a little meter. And at the beginning, you have no grams of the chemical in this solution, but you add a little bit and you stir it up, and then you have 10 grams dissolved in. You do it again. You add some, you stir it up, it disappears, there are 20 grams dissolved. You have none, you added some, you stirred it, 30 grams dissolved. You added some, you stirred it, disappeared, 40 grams dissolved. Then you tried it again and it didn't work. You stirred it up, it didn't dissolve, so because you still had some left over, 40 grams would be the solubility, the maximum amount that you can dissolve. We're going to think graphically a little bit. This whole range on the left side of this line, from 0 grams up to 39.99999 grams, when the water was not full of the chemical, we give this whole range of possible solutions a special name. And we call these solutions with amounts lower than the solubility, they're called unsaturated. So this whole part of the line, from 0 grams all the way to 40 grams, every time you added it and you stirred it up and it dissolved, these solutions that you made were unsaturated because they did not have the maximum in it yet. For example, if you had 100 milliliters of water with only 10 grams of sodium chloride dissolved in it, it would be here on this graph. You would have an amount that's less than the maximum solubility, which is 40. So because you have less than the maximum, a solution containing 10 grams per 100 milliliters would be unsaturated. So if you have exactly the maximum amount dissolved, that also gets a special name. If you are exactly at the solubility level, exactly at the maximum solubility, we call this a saturated solution. For example, if I had 100 milliliters of water with exactly 40 grams of sodium chloride dissolved in it, it'd be here. You would have exactly the maximum solubility. And so a sodium chloride solution with 40 grams per 100 milliliters would be called saturated. Finally, we have this right side. If you have more than 40 grams dissolved in water, it also has a special name. If you have more than the maximum amount dissolved, the solution is called supersaturated. So this whole right side of the thing, it goes from 40 all the way up to infinity. Anything with this amount dissolved would be called supersaturated. So if you have more than the normal maximum solubility, like you have more dissolved than should be possible, you call it supersaturated. But how can you have more than the maximum dissolved? What does supersaturated really mean? Because you're more than the maximum. Let me tell you one way to do it. First, you get some water, and you dissolve enough solute in it to make it totally saturated. So you put in some sodium chloride, and you stir it up until eventually you get all the way up to 40 grams dissolved. So you reach the point of maximum solubility. And now when you put in more scoops, it won't dissolve. So you put in some more scoops, and it won't dissolve because you're over the solubility. And I'm going to graphically represent it like this. This is the part that's dissolved in the water, and then this is the part that's still not dissolved because it's above the maximum. It's solid, that's why it's a different color. See? So it's possible to do some chemistry magic to temporarily increase the maximum solubility. So for example, maybe you could just heat it up, and when you heat things up, they can dissolve more solids. Or you'll expose it temporarily to other conditions, like some sorts of radiation or whatever. And when you do this chemistry magic, the maximum solubility temporarily increases. It goes up, so it's not 40 grams anymore. It's maybe 60 grams per 100 milliliters. So now that you did your chemistry magic, you did something to the solution, the amount of solute that you have is below the new maximum. So that solid that you have, that yellow section, it dissolves. It dissolves now that the conditions have changed. And now that it's all dissolved, you can change the conditions back. You can cool it back down or do something else. So the maximum solubility changes back to what it used to be, which is 40 grams in this case. And now you have more than the normal maximum dissolved, because you changed it, then you dissolved it, then you changed it back. And you call it supersaturated. So for example, if I had 100 milliliters of water with 70 grams of sodium chloride dissolved in it, 70 grams is over here. It's on the right. It's above the normal solubility limit. You would have an amount more than the normal maximum solubility, which is 40. And so, a sodium chloride solution with 70 grams per 100 milliliters would be called supersaturated. And they're really unstable. So supersaturated solutions, they exist, but they tend to suddenly undissolve all the solute above the maximum. And it looks like this. You will have a cup of what looks like water, and you just flick it, or you nudge it, or you jiggle it a little, and then all of a sudden, all the solid pops out at once. That all should have been dissolved, but it wasn't because of some chemistry magic. If you have a supersaturated solution and you pour it out into a cup, also, sometimes when it hits, that impact will cause the solute to suddenly undissolve and turn into a jelly, like this is right here. So supersaturated solutions are not very stable. Okay, that's it. To summarize what we learned, if a chemical solubility is X, then if you have less than X dissolved, you're called unsaturated. If you have exactly X dissolved, you're called saturated. And if you have more than X dissolved, you're called supersaturated. So these four things, it was 3 vocabulary words, and then 1 fact. If a solution has less than the maximum amount dissolved in it, it's called unsaturated. If you have exactly the maximum amount dissolved, you're called saturated. And if you have more than the maximum amount, it's called supersaturated. Supersaturated solutions are unstable and require some chemistry magic to make. That's it. If you learn these 4 things, then you got everything you're supposed to out of this lesson. I hope this was helpful.